Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America for what is today, January 7th. Happy New Year, everybody. Hope you've slid into the new year. I am your host, Don Irvine, joined by my host, Brian McNichol, who's now managed to make it back home, I guess.
Right.
So
Back in
we're back
Virginia.
in our proper places.
That's right.
Um,
Good morning, everybody. Good to be with you.
had a good trip. I'm trying to find something here, but I should have brought this down. All right. So, uh, and what the I had a choice of on National Day today, um, between National Bobblehead Day, which I like bobbleheads, or National Tempura Day, and I love tempura, but I thought bobbleheads might be more relatable to you than
Yeah.
tempura. Yeah.
Um, what a thing, though. That's like I have one of the girls I coach. Her dad is a big time collector of bobbleheads. I think he told me he has every bobblehead the Nationals have ever issued. And
Oh,
so, like,
that takes a lot of work.
that takes a lot of work, and it means that most of the time if they have a bobblehead giveaway, he drops whatever he's doing and goes there or arranges someone else to go get it for him. So I mean,
Yeah,
it's a lot of work to do that. It's quite involved.
yeah. I mean, see, now look, you and I grew up. I mean, giveaways at ballparks have been something that's been going on forever.
They used to
They
give away
have.
the bats. Like, oh, no bueno anymore.
I remember getting a Washington Senators batting helmet type of
Yeah,
thing, cheap plastic. So I had a bunch of things over time when I was a kid. But as I recall, I mean, what it was like back then is that you enter the ballpark, and if you were among the first how many ever thousand, or you qualify, you were old enough, they basically had somebody handing those out to you.
yeah,
I have heard, and I don't know this because I don't really do this that much, is that now it's a little bit more of a free for all. Is that they just have these areas or whatever, and you go get your thing. So I guess somebody's minding that, but they're
yeah,
they're not really necessarily handing them out one per. They're not keeping close track of, like, here's this, go, move on. Some places it becomes kind of a free for all. So, and the bobbleheads, I know the national bobbleheads, they're about what, like maybe yay big. I
mhm,
remember when, as a kid, I know they were a lot bigger. I have
yeah,
one. Just
yeah.
looking around
Right,
here.
they've been small down.
I think I have one still, maybe tucked away. Maybe I tossed it away. I remember getting a bobblehead from Blair High School. Okay,
That's right.
I don't even. It was a basketball. I don't even know why I have that. And how I got that darn thing. But yeah, bobbleheads were, they were kind of big for a while, and then they faded off, and then they've come up with a whole new collectible thing. I blame, social media has kind of really gins it up. This and the internet, people get it, and then they try to resell the bobblehead at a much higher price to people who can't be there, and things like that. So I do have a Scherzer bobblehead running around the house somewhere, but I don't go around chasing bobblehead deals. I kind of wistfully look at these things sometimes. Yeah, it'd be nice, but I'm not going to go make the trip.
Yeah. It's it's kind of tough. I almost never get to a game in time to get the bobblehead, and
Right.
I think
That's
it's kind of what you said. But you're talking about they have them on the table and you grab it off the table. So I went to they had the All-Star game in Philly one time. It was at the Vet. So this has been a few years, right?
oh yeah.
And the one of the giveaways was they gave me this whole packet of stuff, but at the end they said you stop by this table and you get a plastic coffee mug. It was like a Stein with a top on it, and said the All Star Game logo on it and all that stuff. So I go after the game. The girl hands me one, and then when the boxes were done, they would knock the boxes down off the back of the table. Right, that was just, and some other guy picked up the boxes. So she hands me one, and she knocks off the boxes, and no box comes to replace it, which means I got the last one. And all of a sudden, huge fist fight breaks. It's Philly, right? You mean you're out, right?
See, brotherly love.
And I'm like, I'm the last guy with a box. I gotta go.
Protect it with your life.
Like,
protect your life.
That's right.
I'll say, ballpark giveaways are kind of funny too, because I totally underestimate sometimes how popular things are. I've gone to a few Bowie Bay Sox or now Chesapeake Bay Sox games in the past, and didn't go this past season, but a couple of years ago, there was one of the games that we were attending, and it was the Hawaiian shirt night. Well, apparently that's a regular thing for them. I had no clue, and I was there easily an hour and a half or more before the first pitch. And I get over there and I'm like, there is this line to get into the stadium that is ridiculously long. I'm like, I've never seen a line this long at a Bay Sox game, and obviously by the time I get in, all the shirts were gone, which is not a huge loss. I mean,
yeah,
but I'm thinking like, holy moly. I mean, there's like a cult-like following fanaticism about this stuff, even at the minor league level.
That's right.
So
maybe especially at the minor league level.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know. I think the whole thing is all kind of fascinating. And I think the National Bobblehead Museum, of all places, was behind the National Bobblehead Day. So
right.
I will have to actually look up where the National Bobblehead Museum is. But if I remember close enough, maybe I will take a look at it. But I'm not exactly quite ready to go on a complete pilgrimage.
Yeah, I'm not buying a plane ticket for that.
Yeah, it's right. Well, check your road map. I mean, maybe it's something that's on one of your many road trips that actually might be closer than you think. I don't know. I have no clue. All right. Well, it's there's really not much in news except for something about some country named Venezuela and some guy named Nicholas Maduro, surprising the world, in essence, with this U.S. with this bold action that they took, capturing Maduro and his wife, extraditing him to New York to face drug charges, and in essence, taking control of Venezuela, kinda. I mean, Maduro is out. He's got his vice president is now in, and all this kind of stuff. I mean, what's your take on all of this stuff? Because there's a lot of opinions about this.
Yeah, she's is funny because, like, first of all, she's like, he's innocent and this is all wrong. We're gonna bring him back. We're unwinding this and screw America and all this stuff. And then I guess she got a call from Washington, and now she's like, we're gonna cooperate with the U.S. in every way possible. So I think that's what you're gonna get is somewhat grudging cooperation from this vice president until another government can be elected and enshrined and whatnot. Should we have done this? Heck yeah. This guy is a leading troublemaker in the world. And it's like, it's only that since the Trump administration has been paying attention to this, that you've really come to know, like, all the things he had his tentacles in, right? Like, they're supposed to, he's defying sanctions. So, we have the Monroe Doctrine, right? You're not supposed to, we're in charge of our hemisphere. Don't come into our hemisphere for strategic stuff. And past administrations, Republican and Democrat, have backslidden from that to the point where, we're sanctioning people over oil, and he's shipping them oil right under our nose to China, Russia. China needs oil, so they have an oil need. It's a lot of leverage on China if you can control how they get their oil, and send it to the Russians so they can resell it and make hard capital. And so they have, it's most of the oil that comes out of Venezuela is hard to process. Right, we have a few plants on the Gulf Coast, Louisiana and Mississippi, that do that kind of work. They've been keeping themselves busy since Venezuela shut off oil sales. We shut off oil buying from Venezuela. with tar sands from Canada and other things that are not as efficient. So, they'll get back to refining the kind of stuff they're made to refine. I don't know. I think what's going to happen with Maduro is, a lot of people will get mad, but I would say in less than 5 years he'll be back in Venezuela, and what he's going to do to make that happen is he is going to give us a lot of information. He's going to testify to a lot of stuff. He's going to get a lot of people in trouble because a lot of misdealings in the United States and around the world went through this guy, right? And so he's going to fink him out. It's all he can do, because otherwise he'll never get out of the United States. And I believe the big matter, then the big cause of this whole thing is election interference. They think the Trump administration believes that like the Smartmatic machines were programmed from Venezuela, that the ballot numbers were changed in Venezuela. So, they're going to get to that. That's the thing that, I guess Musk figured out exactly how they were doing it shortly before the 24 election. And they were able literally hours to spare, stop another steal from happening in 24. So, I think that, the reason that he was overthrown is because he meddled in U.S. elections, that he helped steal the 2020 election. And the way that he's going to get home is he is going to tell us all about
it. Yeah, it's going to be kind of interesting. I mean, there are lots of questions to be answered on this whole Venezuela situation. I mean, the current president right now, Delcy Rodriguez, she's a staunch Maduro, supporter, as you had alluded to at the beginning. And though she's probably not the biggest problem, I think it's the National Assembly leader is actually much more of a flaming leftist and can cause more trouble than she can at this point. We have, there was an election that was by all means, as far as anybody can tell, was won by the opposition, for which, in typical, Maduro fashion, kind of from the whole Chavez regime too, is that you don't recognize anybody who beats you, and they force them into exile. You've got Machado, who, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who Trump did not, anoint really as the next leader. Questions have arisen as to why.
Yeah, so that was a very good move by Trump, by the
way. What's the issue with Machado for you?
She does not, it was one of those things. She was elected in theory, right? And, she does not, the things they said, okay, we'll give this to you if you can tamp down certain things. And she was unable to do it. She was unable to control the behavior of anyone else. So she's not looked at as a leader. So if you install her as the leader, then she looks like an installed leader, right? And she'll never have the support of the people, but she'll look like she was tapped from a foreign country. She's the U.S. viceroy in essence, right? So it did not look like she could take control. It did not look like she had the coalition to run the country. So they need to go back. And she was the vice, right? She wasn't elected president. There was a guy who was elected president.
There was a guy, yeah, and he's the one that's in exile right now.
Right. So, and, I don't know what they will do with him, but I think where they're headed probably is another election, and it'd take 4 to 6 months to actually pull it off, and I think we're going to run it till then. Maybe even Stephen Miller. So, could be interesting.
Yeah, so I'm looking this up. I actually meant to check this over. The guy is Edmundo Gonzalez.
Right.
was the one who had actually won the election, for which the Maduro cronies all said no, he didn't. So that, yeah, I mean, I think it would behoove the U.S. to clear the path and say let's have an election, and get that thing going sooner rather than later.
Yeah, a leader that they chose, that's chosen in an open, fair election that everybody's watching.
Right. And look, and as far as I'm concerned, I mean, look, they could, this guy Gonzalez, he could come back and run again. But
Yeah.
this at least, and he won't have Maduro's cronies hopefully interfering in that if U.S. is going to watch over this election to try to stop any more of the fraud and everything that occurred before. So that would inspire the people at least, I think, to say that maybe they can actually get something there. The news media predictably has been kind of all over the, generally kind of an anti Trump mode. I mean, I've heard things of the point of we kidnapped a world leader and all these kinds of things, and
it was unconstitutional.
It's unconstitutional.
You know what? You know who didn't say that? It's always curious to me, like who bounces, right? Who bounces out of that theme? And what's her name on The View? The Latino woman on The View, Ana. What's her name?
Oh yeah, what's her name?
Yeah. So you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about it, but she's forgettable. People on The View are kind of forgettable.
Yeah. But she's like, she goes, who is cheering this? Every Cuban American in the country, every Venezuelan American in the country, everybody who's lived in Latin America under these dictators and knows what they do to people and how they do it are cheering this, right? This is a great moment of freedom for them, right? She goes, I don't want to praise Trump, right? But, what he did here was, he lifted a lot of people's hopes for a free country. So,
yeah, it's Ana Navarro.
Ana Navarro, that's her name.
Yeah. So
really interesting. The whole rest of her, like, I can't believe she's saying that.
Well, that brings up the other part of that too. I mean, it's like because we had talked a little bit about the whole quarantine issue before on the boats and the ships and everything like this were choking Cuba. But this is another part of the calculus now, is that Cuba's in real trouble now because now you've actually removed the leader who was supporting your country. Where are you turning to? I mean, how much is Russia or China? How much are they going to do? I mean, Russia or China now are thinking like, okay, we didn't think the U.S. was ever going to go this far. We have to rethink what we wanted, how we're proceeding with all of this. But it does give Cubans. I mean, look at Secretary Rubio. I mean, this is a huge opportunity for people like him and the people he knows. And yeah, sure. There are protests in the street about this, but there are probably far more people out there in the streets cheering this whole thing on. So, all the expats that have left, Venezuela over the years because they couldn't make a life anymore. I mean, but between Chavez and Maduro, they ruined the economy. Yeah. This was a country that was actually
the wealthiest country in South America. Now it's one of the poorest.
Yeah,
in 20 years' time,
it was doing very well, and they totally decimated this country. And so you have people who had high positions and were doing well, in Venezuela, and now they're call center operators in other countries and stuff like that. I mean, and also just because of the thuggery of the whole Chavez Maduro regime, is that a lot of them have to live in fear. They can't necessarily live in the open. So this is a big reprieve for a lot of them, thinking that maybe we can go back to our homeland and maybe we can actually make a life for ourselves again. I think the market, I think a lot of observers, they're jumping on the oil train a little bit too early because it's been so long since they had really meaningful oil production that the American companies can't just go back in there and just turn on a switch and say we're doing. I mean, Chevron has been making efforts in that regard lately, but it's not like all the other companies that want to go in there and have property seized by the government can come back in and just start all, come back in and pick right off where they left off. So this is kind of a longer term situation if they want to go in that direction. But Venezuela is an oil rich country.
One of the most oil rich on earth.
Right. Really yeah, is. It is. Right. It is. And so
us and Iran,
Right. So strategically, it's good. It would be great for the U.S. as well. but the Venezuela people, I mean, they deserve to live and govern themselves.
Right.
Trump should make it absolutely clear that this is the country they will run this country once they have open elections. That
Right.
maybe the U.S. will kind of be poking around in the background, and the CIA or whatever will be there, and all these kinds of things for a little while. But the long term, plan really is that to restore Venezuela and its prosperity from the Chavez days, go back to pre-Chavez and say, this is, we want you to thrive. We're not interested in running Venezuela, nor should we. I mean, that
Right.
is not our job.
Right. And we have also served notice to Russia and China: do not get involved in this, or you will pay a price. They turned back ships that were coming to get oil to take to China. And today last night, I guess, they boarded a Russian ship, a ship that had been reflagged Russian, that was going to pick up oil. So, they're telling you, don't do this, right? And it was being accompanied by Russian Navy. And so, like, our Navy has got on there and stopped the ship. And you can see in the picture the Russian ship in the background. It's literally that close, right? But, they're like, come on, do whatever you're going to do. Do it right now. And then they backed off, and the Russian, U.S. took control of the ship. So, the world understands that, like, the Monroe Doctrine is back and forth. Get out of our hemisphere. The other thing is, the governments of Central America have this association, right, of them, and I can't think, KDAF or something. I can't remember what they call it, but like, they wanted to have a vote to censure the U.S. for doing this, so condemn the U.S. for doing this. It was led by the president of Mexico. So the president of Argentina organized all the new pro-freedom leaders in Latin America and defeated the vote. So defeated the measure. So they didn't condemn because they didn't have the votes. Thanks to Milei and the new guy in Panama, the new guy in Bolivia, right? Chile. So you're now turning, one of the big things people don't realize is, like, you're turning a whole continent from hardcore left to hardcore right. And so, free economics, free citizens, you don't have this, secret police going around busting people, all this kind of stuff in all these countries, right? They're dismantling that, and they're going with free economies all over South America. So who's left behind, right? Well, for one thing, Brazil, obviously, they're still stuck with a leftist, and he appears to be willing to kill or imprison whoever he needs to stay in power. And Canada, because the lady in Mexico, she makes a lot of noise, but she's also made come to a lot of understanding with the United States over her role and their role and the cartels, and we're not exactly pleased with her, but she's on a lot better standing with us trade wise than Canada. And Canada has a big problem because they decided to go the other direction and defy us and show how tough they were. And now they're left out of the whole continental economic picture, right? They're going to have to, find new leadership and do some new stuff, or they're going to be in huge trouble.
Well, I think one of the countries that pops up on the radar for a lot of people now, though, is Colombia, because of their leftist government and their big role in drugs. And so, I mean, if the president is concerned about drug trade as well, I mean, that could be yet another target. But I think, but you can't bite off more than you can chew either. I mean, it's like, if you're going to do that, you probably have to kind of resolve the Venezuelan situation, kind of get that stabilized, get your regime change that the people vote for there before you move on anything else. But, we have learned that this whole process on Venezuela, even though we had some public things going on there with the boat quarantine and all this kind of stuff, this has been in the works for quite a while. Right. So for all I know at this point, plans are being made to look at saying, is there anything they can do or should do about, Colombia at this point? And
and told him to watch his arms.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm Pietro, I mean, I'm kind of like, oh my, I just better watch my step here to make sure I don't fall too much out of line. But I'm sure that these left wing leaders in South America are looking at this going on, saying like, oh my gosh, what is happening to this basic region of Latin America, and what will happen next? So you're not untouchable.
Yeah, the leftists, the argument they make about Venezuela is that they don't really send us a lot of drugs. Well, they send us a lot of people to distribute drugs, right? They organize the distribution, so they are the bad guys, right? But Colombia does send us a lot of drugs, and in fact, a lot of a very harmful drug, cocaine. And it only comes from 3 countries in the world: Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. That's the only places cocoa will grow like that. So they're not responsible. They are directly responsible, right, for a lot of cocaine getting into the United States, a lot of people dying from it. So he is not out of the woodwork. He needs to address his thing, because I heard Trump talking about this the other day, and I've never heard him talk like this about drugs before. But like, someone has impressed upon him the like real connection between this stuff gets in the country and people die, and it devastates families. And he's got that in his head. And he is really mad at drugs right now, at illegal drugs in the country. And so, if you get in his way, I mean, all the other people get in his way can tell you that's not a good thing, right? Because he means it. So, if I was Colombia, I would be looking for ways to accommodate and not defy, because, as Trump says, you don't have the cards.
So I'm waiting for, once we have a new freely elected leadership in Venezuela, for one of the first actions of the new president will be to name a government building after Donald Trump, with gold lettering.
They've already named something after him in Venezuela. They've already a street or a road or something.
But you got to give him a big building with lots of gold
big
lettering.
Building with Trump on the top. Maybe a couple of resorts,
Yeah. Nothing small. The guy needs big. He needs big. You got to keep feeding Donald Trump's ego.
Huge.
Yeah, huge. Exactly. Yeah, that's the one thing about it. All right. Well, the other thing that has popped up too, which I dismiss in general, is to talk about Greenland. Has come back up again. It's amusing. But
time to give it to us. Quit messing around. So my one friend, he goes, are you willing to go to war to capture Greenland? And I'm like, well, like, who would this war be against, right? Because Greenland has no army. The Danes are not going to send an army over to fight for it, right? There's no war. This is going to transpire in a different way than war, right? It's going to be diplomatic pressure. I guess they've asked for a meeting with Rubio. The government of Denmark has asked for Rubio to meet with them to discuss Greenland. And so I guess they have decided it's time to make a deal. So maybe that won't be too long in coming. Greenland, that's one of those, like Colin Powell said, if you break it, you own it. If we get Greenland, so basically what's there, and the American left will get involved in this. That's why you kind of have to take it into consideration. There's about 54,000 people that live in Greenland. That's about 23,000 households or something like that. Almost all of them are on welfare. The Danes, they don't want it. They didn't develop there's oil there. There's rare earth minerals. There's all kind of stuff that could be used to make it economically viable. And the Danes have not done any of that. None of that is in their plan. So they just say, hey, we'll mail you a check every month. Don't worry about it. So so you have a population where, you can imagine if they get a free check every month and there's nothing to do and it's long cold nights and all that kind of stuff. What you have is a country that you got a lot of people sniffing gas and all that kind of stuff. It's a terrible drug abuse and alcohol abuse amongst even the very young kids there. So you're sort of taking a basket case population on, but you also get 11% of the world's known reserves of rare earth minerals, and You get access to. The other thing is like if you shoot a nuke from Russia to the U.S., right, goes up like that, goes in. The best way to shoot them is at the apex, right? The best time to hit them is when they're their highest. They're their highest just before they get to Greenland. So if you hit Greenland with your missile thing, you hit them in the perfect place. So beautiful, brilliant hand missile thing there. But I mean, it's the perfect place to shield against Russian missile, intercontinental ballistic missiles. It also helps us keep a better eye on what's going on up above the Arctic Circle, where both Russia and China are making inroads, and with possible very dangerous implications for us. So, yes, we need it. Yes, there's a lot of good reasons to get it. Yes, the Danes indeed do not take very good care of it. But it's just a matter of like, how do you get them to give it to us, right? I don't think we're going to attack Denmark, or it's going to end up in our hands peacefully. Maybe we have to pay for it. But I don't think we're too long away from calling Greenland part of the U.S.
Well, that'll be interesting to see if this ever comes to fruition. I mean, I think the whole Greenland thing from the time it started, just shook up Denmark. They didn't, they were totally blindsided by this, never saw this really coming. And I think they're now becoming extremely protective of that, even if it is a welfare state, and they have to dump all this money in there. I guess, they're going to try to make some kind of point of how they'll try to improve the lives of their citizens that live on Greenland at this point in time. But I don't know, it could be that the U.S. comes up with a price that that Denmark can't refuse, or they come to some kind of cooperative agreement where, we pay a huge sum for mineral rights. They can keep the citizens, and let them keep sending them
or whatever.
Yeah, they can do that or whatever, and and we can go and do that. I don't know. I mean, there'll be maybe something down the line, because it doesn't keep coming up because Trump is joking around. The Trump administration sees this as a strategic asset, and they're going to keep poking and prodding until they find a way to get these guys to come to the table and say, okay, what are we negotiating on? What can who's going to give what, and where are we going to be on that? So yeah, I'm curious. I don't necessarily think it's going to happen anytime soon, but with President Trump, anything is possible.
That's right. That's right.
I don't put any of these things out of the realm of possibility as long as he is in office. It's there's always a surprise. Makes my head continues to spin, and I don't even know how to deal with it half the time.
One more thing on that though, all this stuff that's going on. So who the administration's point man on almost all of it is Rubio. You see the memes on there where he's sitting in that chair and he keeps getting other jobs, and now he's the head of Greenland and the head of Venezuela and running 4 federal agencies and whatever, right? And he's sitting in that chair going, please no more. But Rubio in, sort of Vance out, right? I haven't seen Vance in a lot of this stuff. So, is Trump soured on Vance? Is we decided Rubio's the successor and not Vance? That'd be an interesting development.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, it is showing that Trump has got a lot of confidence in Marco Rubio for handling all these various things, and Rubio has done a good job as secretary. So I mean, he hasn't run afoul really of Trump, in these ways. I mean, I think Vance is still the MAGA heir, but you better keep your eye on Rubio. If Rubio is even remotely thinking about running in 2028, he's building a strong resume at this point. So
that's right.
So don't sleep on Marco Rubio quite yet. I don't know. Maybe it's Vance Rubio as a ticket. I don't know.
No, Rubio Vance.
Rubio Vance. All right, now I've got this cough I can't shake. Great. Um, our Kamala's buddy Tim Walz trying to run for that third term. He was determined to run for that third term as governor, and then all that fraud just hit him in the face.
Yep.
And it's not like it wasn't there; it has been there, right?
That's right.
So this is not a new development. This has been going on for a number of years, and he's been Walz was trying to find a way to sidestep this.
And pretend it didn't happen and keep it going, right? That's the thing that bugs me about this. So that it'll all get broken up now, I assume, right? If I was running for governor of Minnesota, I would say, hey, I'm going to end the Somali fraud. I'm going to close this down. And I think you would win, right? I think most people do not want billions of dollars going to, daycare centers that don't have any kids. But the thing about it is like he was ignoring this. The media was ignoring this, despite, I think Powerline or somebody has been following the story, but for years. But most of the media has ignored this. Okay. So this kid goes around to these daycare centers and says, where's the kids? There are no kids here. Get out of here. Right. And there's nothing, there's stuff over the windows. There's no daycare center here. You're lying. Right. And so some little kid goes around with his phone taping these people. And all of a sudden, Tampon Timmy's out of the race, could be facing indictments. They're trying to get Klobuchar to come back and run for it. She's in a safe Senate seat, right? She's in through at 29. She's in through. You didn't have to stand until 28, I believe, is her next election. So, she's not going to give that up to go, run Minnesota and clean up a bunch of fraud and mess that Tim Walz made. This is what happens when you just vote D because he's D, right? Because you ended up with a guy who's really not that level of politician. And then, you have to think about the Democrats. They weren't thinking about you at all when they chose this guy to be the running mate, right? They were just trying to balance the color and the gender and all this stuff, right? Because that's how they think, right? It's all, you're not a person, you're a thing which has certain colors and genders and whatnot. So, they made a terrible choice. And now it looks like, I see these people on here, I see them on the internet, and they're like, oh, don't you wish we'd have voted for Kamala? I'm like, heck no, I do not wish, not a single moment of my life do I wish that, right? Because, and look at the idiots, we don't know how many idiots she would have picked if she'd have been president. But the one person she got to pick beforehand is a complete idiot, right? There's no clue what's going on and is now out of the governor's race. And they're now trying to force him to resign to avoid, a messy situation.
For which he is refusing to do at this point.
Yeah,
right?
Which he's refusing to do.
Yeah, because he does have Minnesota in his best interest at heart, so he can't resign.
Right. They need me.
Yeah, they need him. The fraudsters need him.
Yeah, they do. That's exactly right. And now, thanks to this kid, the Washington, California, somewhere else, they're now finding a bunch of this fraud and stuff that they're going to go after. So I think Newsom could be in trouble because California apparently it's a huge problem and pretty easily exposed.
I mean, they're already prosecuting like welfare fraud in Mississippi. And they've had people plead guilty and all of this. The problem is not unique, like, to Minnesota. The system allows people to go ahead and basically rip off the taxpayers, rip off the government. But the people in charge need to actually be in charge. I mean, they actually need to pay attention to what's going on there. Instead of just taking this government money and saying, oh, okay, that's fine. You guys apply, and there's no vetting and stuff like that, leads to massive fraud. There's just not enough, no one really audits these guys and things like that. So Minnesota should be thanking Nick Shirley instead of threatening his life for showing that, there's things got to be fixed there. And I think I agree with you that, Amy Klobuchar, I mean, why do you want to give up the cushy Senate seat that you've got and you can keep for life, in essence, right. To try to go and clean up the Minnesota mess? That's not an ideal situation. how do you win there? I mean, so maybe you wind up doing it, but does that elevate you to the presidential level?
Yeah, it might be good for the DFL is what they call it in Minnesota,
Right.
Democrat Farm Labor.
Farm labor people.
Yeah, so it might help the DFL in Minnesota, but it's not going to help Amy.
Yeah.
To go back
So I
and
mean,
put her foot in that mess.
yeah, and then if she gives up that seat, then that cracks a small opening for.
Well, I mean, think about that. It could be a big opening, right? Because right now, I mean, if you're ever going to, they're also going after voter fraud there, right? So, if you get clean voting rolls and you get a bunch of people mad about all this Somali theft and corruption and the government's like refusal to take it on in any way, like you do have a chance that the right Republican could win. It's not impossible.
Well, then that Republican better be very middle of the road in a state like Minnesota.
I don't know. I mean, he's just going to be a generic other. So it kind of almost doesn't matter what he says.
What's Norm Coleman doing these days?
Yeah, that's right. And there's also, I don't know if you saw it, there's a new thing out that they look back at the votes in Norm Coleman's race, and there's no way he lost.
That's the thing. I mean, look, I hate the whole voter fraud thing. I won't go down into a lot of conspiracies on voter fraud, but I mean, I think I can look at Maryland when Ellen Sauerbrey first ran for governor. There was some chicanery. I am convinced there that that she lost that race.
The Glendenning,
Norm Coleman. Definitely, there were some pretty sketchy things that went on over there.
Yeah, in his finding the votes in the back seat of the car and all this.
Right. So yeah. So I think
But you're right about Sauerbrey. That was, people don't remember that, but when she loses by like 3,200 votes, and she was ahead all night, and all of a sudden they did just enough to make it Glendenning. It was Glendenning, right?
Yeah.
So I've always thought that one was fishy as all get out too.
Yeah, and then so when she had a rematch, she got crushed. But
yeah,
what had happened in that intervening period of time too is that Democrats came back to the party, but Glendenning had also adopted some of the more popular parts of Sauerbrey's platform, in essence, and by putting that into place, kind of took away some of the issues that Sauerbrey had won over voters on and stuff like that. So
yeah, the other thing is like, could a Glendenning win an election like that today? Man. I don't think so.
I don't even know if Martin O'Malley can win an election like that anymore. I mean, the party has changed. The Democrats
so far to the left now that I don't think that Martin O'Malley would win.
Right. I mean, and I think we can say that about a lot of things, right? I mean, you can look around, you can say just how many Democrats do we know that served long periods of time in either in governorships, mayors, the U.S. Senate, and the Congress, particularly all the blue dogs, right? They don't exist really anymore because the party has just gone so far.
Went after them. It's like they won't give you any money if you're not pro-abortion.
Yeah, I mean they chased all these people out. Yeah, I mean ostensibly we may have chased a few people out on our own for various reasons, but those blue dog Democrats became basically extinct because the party turned left and said we just can't support you anymore. And so these were pretty good people. I mean, you don't agree with them all the time, right? I mean, like a Sam Nunn or whatever, or a Scoop Jackson or whatever.
Yeah.
But they did some pretty good things.
You could govern with them. You could
You could actually.
Now you don't really. Think about their congressional leadership now is Jeffries, right? Who's terrible. Doesn't say anything of any meaning. Doesn't lead anyone anywhere. Senate same way, right? You're just Chuck Schumer. Like he's practically a meme at this point, right? How bad it is, and all the Democrats they all complain. They're all saying he doesn't represent our message, right? So it's like your turn to the left has not helped your party. You're outside the mainstream and you're losing ground. And these midterms are probably not going to save you, especially inflation keeps coming down, price of gas keeps coming down. You guys made it about affordability, and Trump's about to make everything more affordable. You're going to be in big trouble, right? And people are going to look at this stuff like Venezuela and say, we have a strong president, and he, like it or not, he's getting some things done that have long needed to be done. It's like the border and, accountability and social spending and so forth. So, because all this, like, he's cut off 5 states now from federal like poverty assistance, right? Until you get your book straight and you show that you clean out the fraud and whatnot, you're cut off from federal money. That's a big deal for those states, because those states tend to be, like California, really reliant on public money. So that I'll believe it when I see it that we lose the midterms. I don't believe it right now.
Yeah, it's still kind of cloudy. I mean, the margin is pretty thin. We'll have to kind of see how. I mean, there's still some of this redistricting.
Thinner for them, though. Like of the districts that are considered contested and no one knows who's going to win. I mean, there's X amount of locks for the Democrats and locks for the Republicans, and the few that are in the middle, a lot of them are already controlled by Democrats. So even if you win them, you don't gain a seat, right? So I mean, a lot of them are in trouble. So we'll see.
Yeah, we're still a little bit early on this, and we probably have some primaries that will bring up some nominees and things like that.
That's right. But and the other thing is that opinions form, right, and then it's hard to change their minds after that. So you basically got till 4th of July to get people back on your side. Right after that, it's kind of locked in, and it's a ride down to the end. So
yeah, and then once early voting kicks in, in most of these areas, it's just that just changes the nature of anything that you do in the last 30 days doesn't matter for a chunk of the people.
Fair amount of the electorate. That's
they've already either voted by mail or they voted in person early, and so
which is why that should not be allowed. That's a big reason why we should not have that.
Yeah, really. I mean, I think as convenient as it is for me, I think the whole thing has just gone out of control.
Yeah,
and so it's things happen. We know things happen in the last few weeks of an election, and now they have negligible effect because so many people have voted beforehand.
Yeah, and the other thing that happens on that is like if you get elected to a state legislature seat or something, okay, you don't really know what your voters want, because you can't tell, because like they have early voting, you can't tell what precinct it came from, right? It's just there's a pile of votes, so you don't know, like in my district, did they see this differently, because you don't really have that data. They just went and voted. So
yeah, I mean, I think the best they can do is they collect by party. They can say this many R's voted, this many D's voted, this many I's voted, or whatever, unaffiliated. Yeah. But they don't know what the votes are and exactly.
Right. In Louisiana and Virginia, you don't even have party affiliation, so you have none of that.
Right. All right, we got to continue moving along. One of our favorite punching bags organizations, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, has shut off the lights. The board of directors voted to cease operations, and so that's a big one.
That's a big one, because that was their sort of cornerstone for getting it turned back on quickly, is you could just give money to CPB and they would take care of it. So now that they have to go and raise the money themselves, and so I think one of the things you're going to see happening is, people say, I like, Sesame Street or whatever show they like, right? The donation should go to the show. Give to Sesame Street. They'll have foundations, right? Or people you can give to tax-free. But not PBS, not NPR. Give the money to the show itself. So you starve that central office of resources. There's also going to be efforts to take the physical property that's owned by taxpayers and sell it and put the money back in the treasury, so force them out of their offices and out of their radio stations and so forth, and make them do it on their own. So, I'm for eradicating public media. So I'm really good on this. I don't care if they raise their own money and survive. Whatever you put on the radio, you put on the radio. But it should not be one dime of taxpayer dollars going to propagate views we don't agree with.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know that we need the whole thing for whatever your viewpoint is. Why are we doing this? At this point in time. I mean, especially in this day and age, it's I guess you could make an argument for when they set up PBS and all these kind of things, but it's been long surpassed by the fact that we have an internet, and so many ways to go and do this. Why do we need to throw our dollars after that? Yeah. So a lot of stations have left, the PBS affiliation or the NPR affiliation.
Yeah.
They're going to try to go on their own. And some of these stations actually may wind up going dark if they can't get enough support. But this is they need to be able to sink or swim on their own. If they can raise the money for their programming, fine. People want to throw money at it, fine. And some foundations are putting money into that, but
leftist foundation, so it's not going to get any better.
But I don't want my taxpayer dollars going for that. We've already wasted enough money as it is. Can we reduce this? Yes.
The last 20 minutes of this show, we've been talking about wasted money.
Right.
I mean, so just like this is just one. It's kind of symbolic, but. The other thing is they were warned, right? That Uri Berliner, who was a producer for NPR, wrote a thing in the summer of 24 that said, we're moving so far left that we're losing our audience and we're leaving America behind, right? Before, I mean, everybody's always kind of known we were on the left, but, the stories were kind of interesting and they weren't overly virulent and mean and partisan. And now we're drifting into being very much a leftist partisan vehicle, and we need to stop because we're going to lose funding, we're going to lose support, and we're the guy sitting in the tractor listening to our cool stories about things going on in Oklahoma or whatever. He's going to tune out because this you're offending him now. You're way past what the allowable amount of leftism is on PBS. And they thumbed their nose. There were congressional hearings. They went up there and got all arrogant with the people in Congress. And when Congress had a chance to vote on their money, they took it away.
Yeah. All right. We're almost done here. Next up, Zoran Mamdani got sworn in since the time we met and gave his inaugural speech. And that phrase in there that, giving up, what is it?
Replace the cold
frigidity of rugged individualism. I think it was right for the warmth of collectivism. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's the one that that kills the 60 million people. The warm one. Like I'll stay with cold. And that comes as Maduro is being deposed, right? So that's like those events happening at the same time is just too funny because there's the warmth of collectivism was put on display in Venezuela. They nationalized the oil. The government took over everything, silenced all dissent. That's what Mamdani wants to do. Is what happened in Venezuela. And, as we said, it took it from being one of the most prosperous countries in South America to one of the poorest, right? In 20 years. Didn't even take long. This guy, he wants to go back up that hill. And I don't know, did you see he has this housing director, this woman? You gotta go check her out. She's saying, she goes, there's going to be a different relationship between people and property in New York City. And it's really going to affect white families, but there's some families of color, POC people, families as well. But, in other words, they're going to take your house and, they're going to, any kind of landlord, you slip up, you don't fix the light bulbs in time or whatever, they're going to take the property that you're leasing, right? They're just going to abscond your property. Okay, I mean she's seriously talking about that. Your relationship with property is about to change dramatically. I mean, you should look her up. It's really crazy the stuff that she's talking about, and not talking about what she's not talking about is doing anything to improve the New York City Housing Authority, which is the worst, one of the worst slumlords in the world. They don't fix anything. They don't take care of anything. They're terrible. She doesn't talk. She's not worried about. That's the thing she's actually in charge of. Like making it work for the people who need it. She's talking about seizing property from white families. That's her fantasy.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, these people they need to look at California. When they tightened up on rent control.
No amount of showing these people failure will change their mind. It's like, oh, we haven't really tried it fully, right? There's always some excuse that. That those 92 failures doing the same thing I'm doing don't prove that I'm going to be a failure. They're always trying to come up with some little clause that makes them different. It's unbelievable.
So just out of curiosity, I mean, he's only won his first term, but do you think a guy like Mamdani, do you think he could actually win a re-election in New York City?
Well, no, I don't. I think so many things are going to fail. Right, and he's going to have to, go against the police, which he's already doing. That no, he can't survive. I think it's one and done.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine. I mean, even New York voting for him again.
Yeah.
After what he's likely to, with all these people he's appointing, I think he's got a pretty left wing schools chancellor and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's
collapse
bad
on multiple fronts.
It's bad news all the way around.
Yeah.
Democrats had their little memorial to J6 or whatever,
sort of the air's out of that balloon, right?
Yeah.
They tried to make it a big deal, and people were like, "Shut up," I don't care.
Well, I mean, it's mostly a past memory. I mean, to me, you've got to kind of move on to some other things, stuff like that, and it just. But the Democrats think that makes news or has some bearing and whatever, and I don't. That's not an issue you're going to win on, and at this point,
right? I mean, they keep saying, this guy was involved in he approved of January 6th. It's like that's not, he approved of contesting the election. It's like that's not a scarlet letter. That's not going to make me lose anymore, especially on our side, right? We're like, yeah, it should have been contested. It now looks like. There's a almost certain chance that it was cheating. It was done by cheating. You look at what's happened in Georgia and Arizona and elsewhere. They're pretty close to making the case. So, I don't know about. I think that the other thing that came out this time is there was a couple of videos where they have Pelosi saying. I'm responsible for there not being any soldiers there to protect the Capitol, right? That's going to be on me. That's my responsibility. Well, yeah, it was. You're the one that stopped it, and then you got a big riot. And as I've always said, people get all exercised about about pardoning these people. But if you take people in Portland, right, who attacked the federal courthouse, chained the doors shut so people couldn't get out, and then tried to set it on fire, with a bunch of cops and federal employees inside the building, okay? And when the cops got out, attacked them, threw stuff at them, tried to kill them, whatnot, okay? All those people, if you look at what happened to them criminally, they were all adjudicated and out of jail in less time than J6 protesters spent in jail. So in other words, for doing basically the same thing, a big disruptive protest, and they weren't trying to kill anybody, right? They're just going through the Capitol and, taking the flag and sitting in Pelosi's chair and all that kind of nonsense. Those people were punished more than the people in Portland who tried to seal off a building and kill all the federal employees inside, right? They're, even with the pardon, they've spent more time in jail. So, I don't feel sorry for them at all. It's like, heck with it.
All right, we got to wrap this up. We've got another shutdown potential in about 3 weeks. Going to kick the can down the road.
Deal, and we're going to get some kind of mild poop sandwich. We're going to have to swallow it, but I think it'll be okay. I think the Democrats lost their shutdown. last time. And, it was kind of devastating to them, not because they paid a really heavy political price, because they really didn't, but because, when your record is something and O, and all of a sudden it's something and 1, like I coach basketball, right? You get ahead 10-0. I got down on Sunday. We got ahead 10-0. The other team scored. All of a sudden, you're threatened. It's 10-2. It's not really. They haven't caught up. They haven't shown any momentum. They just made a basket, right? But all of a sudden, it's much closer, right? The whole structure of everything changes. It's going to be a game. You're not going to get ahead 40-0. It's going to be the other team's going to score too, right? Well, that's what's going on here.
Yeah. So I mean, we may get yet another interim deal. The Obamacare enhanced subsidies expired, and the world hasn't ended yet. So
right,
but
they will fight for something else. They'll try to get some kind of arrow, something in their, in their prize pack that they can say they got for their people. And I'm sure Trump is ruffling through the papers now, trying to figure out something relatively harmless to give them, and to just get it over the finish line, because there's no advantage to them for another shutdown. They're not going to win.
Trump has said that the insurance companies have made a lot of money, and if the Democrats are the ones who created Obamacare, so
that's right.
It's the Obamacare was just a general nightmare.
Well, it was. It didn't have to be. Like I remember, I was at Heritage that morning, and Bob Moffett was there, and he was getting ready to go up there and stand in that picture with Mitt Romney when Mitt Romney signed this into Maryland. And I said in Massachusetts, and I said I would not be in that picture, right? Because they're going to say, oh, the Republicans were all for it. Look, there's the Heritage Foundation. And it's going to get twisted into a bunch of crap you don't want, and it did. And so what happened is, it wasn't just setting up exchanges, which is, it's you don't really need government in the insurance business, but that's definitely not the worst thing government's ever tried to do, right? But they added all these people to the Medicaid rolls, right? They declared, about 20 or 30 million more people to be eligible for federal government paying for their health care, right? That is the part that has to be undone, right? Those people, these programs are to help the very poor, not the middle class. And so, like, when they're arguing about Obamacare subsidies, they're arguing about a middle class entitlement, right? And we're 38 trillion in debt. We can't have middle class entitlements. That's got to end.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, last couple of things. Marjorie Taylor Greene has left the building, I guess.
Adios.
Yeah, I don't. There were some things I think she may have done that were okay, but I'm not exactly sad to see her go. I mean,
me either. It's like the loose cannon, doesn't really understand most of what she's talking about. Did more harm than good to me. It's like whatever.
All right, and then finally, we'll end kind of on a somber note here. We had the unexpected passing of Representative Doug Lamalfat of California, just 65 years old. So that kind of hits close to home.
Yeah, that's creepy.
Yeah,
I ain't trying to read about that.
Yeah, and then also the passing of Michael Reagan at the age of 80, though they didn't specify a cause yet.
The president's son,
President's son. He was adopted by Ronald Reagan and Jane Wyman just hours after he was born, and had been a very fierce defender of Ronald Reagan throughout his life.
Right.
And so it's a real good egg there on that, and so we're sad to see him go. But that is part of life, right? In essence, the whole thing happens.
Yeah, one more that was one of the worst Americans ever, Aldrich Ames.
Yeah, I thought about Rick Ames, and I was like, yeah.
The worst spy, most damaging spy in American history.
The big traitor.
Did you know that Aldrich Ames and Liz Cheney went to the same high school? They were both McLean Highlanders.
Okay. Maybe that explains some things. I don't know.
So that's kind of like, what are they teaching over there?
All right. You found a way to, I guess, to laugh here at the end. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America. And we will see you again next week with more news.